Well, welcome everybody to the Elseworlds Exchange. I am Sal, and I'm joined today by DeMatteis. Welcome back to the show.
It's been a while, I think.
Yeah, it has.
Hasn't it?
Over a year, I think.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like it. It's funny. Whenever we have any particularly special guests, and I look back, it's always been a year or more, and I go, man, that doesn't feel like it at all. We got to do this again.
Although I have to say, time right now in the world that we're living in, as a freelancer, time is always distorted for me anyway.
Right.
Sometimes it's hard for me to tell what day of the week it is. But now it's just like, I keep saying, it feels like we're living in the middle of a bowl of Jell-O, and everything, we're all just kind of moving like this through this bowl of Jell-O here. And I'm forgetting sometimes from hour to hour now, what day is today? I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, that has been my life for the last 4 or 5 years now of I don't know what day it is, but now everyone gets to enjoy in our collective understanding of time. I've described it as basically being like one month-long week. Each month is like a week where it's like, is it Thursday yet? And it's like, it's been Thursday 3 times.
Right. When my kids were in school, it was like, I know I have to drive them to school, or I have to pick my daughter up or take
milestones.
Her to And, they moved out. So then, all right, my wife's going to work. And so I have a general idea now that it's a weekday, but I don't have anything specific in mind. And now she's working from home, so it's all collapsed completely.
Yes.
So I have no idea.
Now it's like, I got to get this.
I know it's a Thursday because we agreed to talk on a Thursday. It is Thursday, right?
I think today's actually Wednesday.
See, there you go. I have no idea what day it is.
No, I only know it's Wednesday because I scheduled this with you like a month ago. So we picked Wednesday, and so I'm like, I know Wednesday. So every Tuesday, I'm like, oh shit, is it Wednesday yet? I got to make
it. Right.
I'm just sitting in the Zoom meeting.
I've done that where I've had a meeting with somebody, and I'm like, oh, I better get ready, because you have to be home, so you got to clean up a little.
Exactly. Yeah,
and then it's like, oh wait, that's not today.
Damn it! I got to do this all again.
That's right. I have to take another shower this week.
Can I preserve this and just extend it to the next day?
Right.
Yeah. But JM, what's been going on, man? What's been going on lately? I know that you've been busy. I mean, as a freelancer, you constantly have to keep yourself busy.
Yeah.
But
the stuff I'm working on now is basically stuff I can't talk about.
Fair enough.
So we can talk about things that are out now.
Right.
Like Superman Red Sun, the animated movie.
Yes.
Or the Deathstroke animated series, or some comic book stuff that's out there. But pick one. I'll talk about anything.
Well, let's start with the animated stuff, because so many people, because people have been celebrating J.M. DeMatteis for decades.
They're often wherever I go, they're celebrating. It's amazing.
Yeah, they're in the streets. They got banners.
I know. It's the confetti gets really tiresome after a while.
It's funny. I gotta say though, we mock, but someone built, what was that full scale, triple scale model of that Kraven's Last Hunt headstone.
Oh, with the figure coming out of the grave. Yeah.
That is not unlike a monument.
I guess so. But it's more a monument. But when they start building statues to me, we'll have another conversation. And I think that conversation will be long in coming.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, man, Deathstroke. Can you talk a little bit about the formation of this series and where your involvement came in and all of that?
Sure. I'd done a previous series for CWC, so I always have to explain CWC to people first of all, because there's the CW network that we all know, where everyone's watching Supergirl or The Flash or those shows.
Right.
But then they have a streaming platform called CWC. Now, CWC has a lot of previously existing material, but they also do original material. And they've done a bunch of DC animated things. So the one I did before was called Consultation, City of Demons, which I loved. Was one of my favorite animated projects ever. And so they called me up again. So I have to explain the way it's done,
right?
Because and they keep changing it up too. The idea is I write a full length movie basically. I write a script for a full length movie. They then break that up into mini episodes, usually like 5 to 7 minute episodes.
Right.
But what they did this time with Deathstroke is they just put the first 35 minutes out, in one big chunk. So I was like, we spend so much time talking about. What do you think the episodes will be? And suddenly there's 35 minutes of it out there. But maybe the response from people was they'd rather have a big chunk than these little mini episodes.
That's fair.
So they put up the first half of it went up on Seed a few months back. From what I've I've heard, and I'm often the last one to know, so don't quote me. I think within the next couple of months, you'll probably see the other half of this.
Oh, okay.
And then there will be a DVD / Blu-ray / streaming release of a full-length movie, which will have 15 or 20 more minutes than the CW Seed version will have.
Oh, cool.
So the people that go out and stream the movie or buy the Blu-ray are going to get extra story. So that's the thing too. Also, we sit down and we figure out what can we leave out, what can we keep in, will the story still play if we take out that scene, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And it works out pretty well. So that's the basics of it.
Okay.
And as for the story, it's not based on any pre-existing Deathstroke story. It is based on pre-existing Deathstroke mythology.
Sure.
And, basically, I know Deathstroke from years ago from Teen Titans, but he's not one of those characters that I knew inside and out. Some characters, say Spider-Man to me, and I'll tell you everything you want to know. Deathstroke, I didn't have that same knowledge, so they sent me a bunch of material to read, from Marv's early stuff to more recent stories. And I kind of went, well, that's an interesting element. Well, that's an interesting element, and that's kind of intriguing. And from those little intriguing elements that I pulled out of different stories, I built a whole new story around it. But it's really, to me, the most fascinating thing, and I really, really came to really like the character as I was writing this, is the family dynamic.
Right.
So this is really the way this particular version plays. And, it exists pretty much in its own universe. It's not part of the TV DC universe or anything. It's its own thing.
Sure.
It until they tell me different. And it's really sort of the family drama is like this almost Shakespearean tale of a completely dysfunctional family, torn apart by divorce, kids that are traumatized by these events, and they all happen to have superpowers.
Exactly.
So it elevates it up there. And then the other level is, because of the nature of Deathstroke's character, it's an almost James Bondian globe-hopping adventure at the same time.
Yeah, he lends himself to that kind of format.
Yeah. And they got Michael Chiklis as Deathstroke.
Yeah,
that's for amazing casting.
Great casting. It's amazing. Of course, in the field of animation, you get to pick only the right voice for the job. You don't have to worry about the type, the physicality.
Right.
Who can embody the voice of the character best?
Yeah. And I mean, I've said this many times before, but I'm always astonished by the quality of the voice acting in these things. Yeah, it's so good, just so good. I had the same experience with Consultation or with Red Sun. That's out now. They got Jason Isaacs to be Superman. When they said Jason Isaacs, my head exploded. What a brilliant actor! And to get him to be Superman was just. But that's across the board. Yeah, these things are so well cast. And it's not like we're doing cartoon acting now. I mean, these guys are they're giving really wonderful performances. And I'm always so impressed by that.
Well, Warner's has always been kind of a good leader in the field of kind of like mature animation, particularly over the last 20 years or so. I mean, they set the standard with the Batman show and with Justice League and all that. And so, if they were to go kiddie, I mean, you've seen it. They do it with like that. They had the Justice League action show. They had the
Teen Titans Go.
Go. But they all kind of embody their own roles. And so, there's room for it all.
Right.
You've undoubtedly been at least aware of the DC Universe streaming service and how they have all those other shows that are dedicated to that. I'm waiting for your involvement in more of those, but
Yeah, and I don't know, I'm sure all these animated things, I have a feeling, I don't have a subscription. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Hey, DC, I don't have a subscription to DC Universe.
If anybody should have one.
Love to have one. I have a feeling that, half or more of the animated things that I've written are all on there.
They are indeed.
Not to mention they have comics too, right? You have access to
comics? They do
comics?
indeed.
Yeah.
And by the way, kind of like amazing stats right now. I think 53% went up of reading comics on that app recently. It was just
really?
Yeah.
Well, that's great.
Digital's up, at least with when it turns out if you give people access to comics, they'll just read them.
Right. And that's all. I think that's what we all thought digital was going to do right away.
Big time.
But maybe this is a good venue.
Yeah.
Because they're coming there for the TV and the movie stuff. And then they'll sample the comics and maybe that will suck them in. That's the thing.
It's the flawless integration where you could, whereas, when we talk about when they make those movies, like a Marvel movie, there's no place for them to go to get a comic.
Right.
you have to trust that their enthusiasm is so strong that after the high of the movie, they'll get in their car, they'll drive to the local comic book store, and then they'll navigate the maze that is a comic shop, which I love. But
there should be like a little comic book kiosk in the movie lobby. People walk out of the movie and they can go buy comics right there in the lobby. I think that'd be a great thing.
Yeah, at the very least, comic shops, what they could do is they just get like an ice cream truck and they go to the movie theater. Like
that's a great idea. No, it really is a great idea.
I'm just spitballing, but barring that, the option of you have a dedicated app that's about DC, you watch a movie or show, and then it says like on the screen, you could just chain your experience. You go from this to this to this, and that the other, the stage 2 or 3 could be, Marv Wolfman's Titans.
Right.
And you're ready to go.
Yeah.
But
it's always been it's been astonishing me in these recent years as we see these movies and TV shows so hugely successful.
Yes.
Why isn't there an Avengers comic book selling 2 million copies a month?
Exactly.
Or Iron Man or any of these things. Really.
Yeah. And I think it's just barrier to entry. I think it's just the fact that if you give people an option, they'll take it. But barring any options, they just choose nothing, or too many options. That's the other thing.
Yeah,
so you give too much choice is the same thing as giving them no choice, I think.
Right, and then of course the flip side is this concept that I can love superheroes and go to back when we can go to the movies, back in the old days.
Yeah,
go to the movies practically once a month or twice a month and see a new superhero movie. Come home, turn on my TV, and have a choice of endless animated and live action superhero series, and then go get out my video game console and play superhero video games.
That's right.
So where do the comics fit in with that? That's why I think I've seen, as we all seen in recent years, attendance at conventions keeps exploding.
True.
Right? Comic book sales don't keep exploding in any way to catch up with that, because so many of these people are people that love these characters from movies and TV. And I bet you half the people, at least at these big conventions, are people that are fans from movies and TV, not from the comics.
Yeah. And again, it's you know how it is. Like when you try to get anyone to read anything, particularly as a writer, I mean, when you were first starting out, I'm sure when you were like, read my thing, it was just like pulling teeth. It was just constantly like, you're just trying to put something in someone's hands and getting them to look at it. The option of giving anyone a book, anytime you give a recommendation for a book, hey, you should read this. Oh yeah, I'll get around to it. That's never going to happen.
Right. Let alone if it's someone that doesn't read comics and you're handing them a comic book. And there's the other question where there are a lot of people that aren't comics literate, in the sense that they honestly don't know when they look at that page where to look.
Yeah.
They don't know how to go from balloon to balloon and panel to panel. And it's confusing. It's kind of like comic book dyslexia in a way,
That's true.
So there's that element as well. I remember years ago, Andy Helfer, when he was doing the Piranha Press books, and that what did it become after Piranha that we did? I happen to have a cup. I'm resting my computer on a copy of book, but that's the IDW version. Anyway, Paradox Press. That's what it was.
There you go. Okay.
And he wanted those books to be not in terms of story, but in terms of approachability, simpler. Yes. Because he's talked about the fact that civilians don't know how to read comics. And it was a really good point. And Andy was always ahead of the curve on these kind of things. But it was a really smart thing.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't. They just don't.
Yeah. Although I find that I think, and this is, of course, we're going back further than this, because I don't know what the world of the Sunday comics strip is like today, because I just simply don't have a newspaper. But back in the day, you conditioned your average family household to be accustomed to reading the news, which is very important, but also to be accustomed to reading, to have an option, to have something for you. The funnies are literally created just so like dad can read this, mom can read this, and the kid can read this. But reading the comics in the newspaper, I think, trains your brain as a young, mind to know how the format works, particularly if you're talking about like.
But it's a much simpler format.
It is much simpler.
It's very easy to follow. There's a couple of balloons in each panel.
True.
Maybe one caption, and it's not all that fancy stuff that we're all used to. Now, I, as a kid growing up, had a host of learning disabilities and really struggled in school, but I could always read a comic book,
Right.
It was never a problem for me. That particular language, my brain understood.
Yeah.
Whereas other things I really struggled with as a kid. And other people just, to this day, if my wife wants to read one of my stories, I got to hang around and go, no, you read that balloon over there next,
right?
Because she just doesn't have that language. It's not part of her. It's not part of her skill set, or it's not the way her brain is wired. I talk in my workshops sometimes, in a more general way, just about those of us that love comics and why. There's something. It's almost like a chemical addiction or something. It's like, there's something about that combination of words and pictures that when we are kids, I imagine this little chemical drops in our brain, and we get this rush, and we are hooked forever on this combination of words and pictures. And other people will look at that page, and that chemical doesn't drop.
That's right.
And it was always there for me. From the first time I saw a comic book, that was it. I was in love, and it was magical. But there's just something in the way we're wired. I guess it's like anything else in life. There are certain things we respond to, certain things we don't. And I think that's why people in comics are so passionate, because it's like some dopamine effect or something. It's like words, pictures.
That's penetratingly insightful. I had never considered the idea of it having like a visceral chemical, like kind of like a physical reaction.
Yeah.
And yet you see its effect. And if you think of it, I mean, you've heard comics likened to drugs, where it's like, oh, the first one's free, and then you got to keep, and you got to pay, and becoming addicted. And you people who read comics where it's like, I hate this comic. Well, why have you bought every issue? Like, why are you still buying it if you hate it so much? Well, I gotta. Well, I don't know any other way. And it's just like this, but it feels like a kind of compulsion. And I never thought to liken it to like just that that aha moment where once you're introduced to it, I know, and I can almost remember like that moment happening for me as a kid, being like, this is a thing I'm drawn to and will be forever.
You know what kind of underscores that for me? If I pull out like an old comic, one that I read when I was a kid, and you look at that cover, and I always say it's like time travel. It's like something happens in my brain, and I am viewing it through the eyes of the person I was then, and I'm like in this cocoon of that magical feeling that I had as a kid. And it's like an altered state.
Yes.
And I think, story in general does that for people.
Totally.
Story brings us into an altered state that in some way, for me anyway, is more real than so-called reality.
Right.
So I think great storytelling, just like great music, any great art, puts us in some sort of altered state of mind. And those of us that love comics, it really does. It just, that chemical drops. And I think it goes to what you're saying. Well, maybe I don't like this run by this particular writer and artist team, but it's still a character I love, and it's that magical combination of words and pictures, and so I'll complain about it while I'm reading it, but I'm going to keep reading it.
Yeah, that's right. I love that observation, because pardon me, allergies are, I don't know if you're on the East Coast, but it is horrible here. Yeah. But for me, like classic like Dick Sprang Batman covers and everything like that, like I'll just look at those and boom, I'm a child.
I can just look at covers. Sometimes I don't want to even look at the story. I can just stare at old covers, like old Kirby covers or something. Or Dick Sprang. I love Dick Sprang. Oh my God.
Yeah. It's just old covers. Yeah. The old, I remember my mom once gave me a book from the library. It was this big, thick Batman from the 30s to the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And it just has a collection of stories and covers and stuff like that. And it's just, that was my first introduction to Batman. And I'm like, I've never seen anything like it. And that kind of imagery stays with you, and then of course you become attached to it and kind of like addicted to it, and you want more. And of course, as you evolve, as Batman evolved, kind of like your sensibilities evolve too, because of course, where does it end? With the Neil Adams era. So the art is completely different, but that particular art, Adams will transition you from Batman to his run on Avengers to all this, and it's just it's all connected. It's incredible.
Well, that concludes today's interview. And
exactly. Thank you very much. Don't forget to check out Creation Point from James DeMatteis. But man. So since we kind of started this with animation, I guess we'll transition over to Red Son, because people have been waiting for a Red Son animated adaptation forever. If I could think of one name to do the adaptation, it would be yours, because you are like the king of the animated adaptation at this point, I think. Not to mention, of course, the king of
like I said,
story,
I haven't seen the statue yet, so I'm
waiting for that.
it.
I think we'll have to get to work on that. Get some
maybe just a little clay figure or an action figure.
Where is the JM DeMatteis at? Where's that roster? I got to get a.
Anyway, let's get back to reality.
But yeah, but you were mentioning Jason Isaacs and everything like that. But everybody in Superman Red Son, where did that come from? And because of course Red Son is one of those another one of those iconic top 10 Superman stories of all time.
Yeah, it comes from where it always comes from, which is I get a phone call.
It's really just they call you and they go, yeah.
Yeah, I never know when they call me what it's going to be. I really don't. So Jim Krieg, who a producer there, also a wonderful writer and just a wonderful guy who I love, called me up and said, you want to do Red Son? And I'm a freelancer, so the answer, unless you're so booked that you can't fit another thing in, is always yes. That's just the way it is. That's the life of a freelancer. So the best advice I can give anybody is just keep saying yes. Keep saying yes.
Yeah.
And I've worked for Warner Bros. Animation, for 16 years now or more.
Yeah.
So I love working with those guys, and so this was Jim Krieg and Bruce Timm. So, it doesn't get better than that, working with two guys like that. And the truth of the matter is, at that point, I knew Red Son by its reputation, although I had no clue until this movie came out just how monolithic that reputation was.
Yeah.
And I hadn't read it. So they sent me a copy, and I read it. And then basically the process is we get on the phone, and there's a lot of hours on the phone with me and Jim and Bruce, peeling the story apart and putting it back together so that it works in this format as a film.
Yeah.
Versus, what works on the comic book page is not going to necessarily be what works on the screen.
Right.
And I always say a great adaptation is not about getting all the details right. A great adaptation is about getting the essence of the story. If you have captured the essence of that story and its intentions, then I think you've done a good job. If you could have all the details and get the essence wrong,
right?
And so I hope that we did that with Red Son. The response
I'd say so.
Has been pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. What was your read? You since you didn't read it when it came out. Shame on you, by the way. But no. But what was your?
Too busy writing this stuff to read it.
That's if anyone has an excuse, it's those who are creating art. In exchange. But what was your read on it when you first checked it out?
Oh, it was amazing, I thought. Because the thing that impressed me the most about Mark's story was just there was so much creativity and imagination on virtually every page.
Right.
I've said this before. It reminded me of Jack Kirby, not stylistically, but in the sense that, you read the Kirby stuff, especially the stuff that Kirby did by himself.
Right.
And it was just like you'd open the book and 100 ideas would pop off a page and smash you in the face and knock you off your chair.
The audacity.
Red Son had a lot of that. They were like, what a cool idea, on to the next page. What a cool idea, on to the next page. So there was so much in it. And that's one of the challenges of adapting the story. What do you keep in? What do you leave out?
Right.
How do you take this this giant mountain and carve it into a Superman's face that's about this big?
Yeah.
So you have to carve it down and yet again keep that essence. And so that was the real challenge of it, and it was challenging, but in a good way. You want to be challenged by a project.
Totally.
And when you're starting with a piece of material like that, I think one of the reasons I noticed there was a lot of media attention on this out there in the real world media.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because of anything that I did. It's because of the originals, the concept. You say what the concept of that story is, and people are sold, and they're interested.
Yep.
So, it was brilliant what Mark did with that, because all you had to do is give people a one-liner, and they're intrigued.
Yes.
And suddenly, Time Magazine's talking about Red Son. Why? Because it's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Because I'm so brilliant. Because Mark is so brilliant.
Well, it stays because you're brilliant. So that's the thing. You could pitch an idea, and it's that sounds great. But then if the execution sucks, you never hear about it again.
Right. That's true. Well, he had great execution in the story, and hopefully we had excellent execution in the movie.
Because I'm hearing, not only did I, of course, immediately check it out, but also, the word of mouth was, because since I'm in the landscape of, I talk about things amazing people make, people were just constantly, the second, I didn't even know when it dropped. I just got bombarded by, did you see it yet? I'm like, I didn't even know it's out yet. I just heard about it a week ago. And so, you buy it, you check it out, and it's people are like, what do you think? I'm like, well, I think it's brilliant, of course. It's the right people making the right thing.
And I always say, and I have to be really clear about this, it's a group effort. It really, really is, So, I'm working very intimately, we'll say, on this project with Jim and with Bruce. And then, of course, you have Sam Liu, who's the director.
Right.
A whole other level of skill sets to this, and bring the way they bring it alive visually versus what's on the page is extraordinary. Yeah. So I always say I can never take all the praise, nor I could take all the blame because I am one piece of a much bigger puzzle. But I really enjoy that. I enjoy having that interaction. Most of my time is spent alone in the room. So when I get to spend 2 hours on the phone with Jim, 2 hours on the phone with Jim Krieg and Bruce Timm, that's a good day. Yeah. Talking about story. What else? What else is going to make you happy?
That's fair. Yeah. I wanted to talk about this also in respect to your animation work, because I finally I'd heard about it, but I finally caught it. And it took me forever to find it, which is a real damn shame, on Warner's part. But your Death short. Did I lose you? Oh,
for 1 second you froze, so you were like,
yeah, no, you froze too. So I was okay. I just thought I thought I completely screwed up, and I'm like, oh no, no, your Neil Gaiman's Death short.
Yeah, that's on the Wonder Woman Bloodlines DVD.
Yes,
and that was another one. Boy, again, one of my favorite animated projects I ever worked on. Sam Liu, who directed Red Sun, is a director on that. Yep. The idea for that story started with Sam, and then me and Sam and Jim got on the phone. Excuse me, it must be my allergies too. And put the story together from there. And just it was one of those things where from the first moment it was like a magical project. What was really fascinating to me was, and if you know the story, it's about a struggling artist. I don't want to give too much away.
No, because it's so short. You say too much. Over.
Yeah. But the main character is an artist who is really, really struggling to make it in the world. And all of us, the three of us, would get on the phone. It was a deeply personal story to each one of us, because each one of us had been in the position that this guy was in.
Right.
So there are scenes in that movie. The movie, I'll just say the movie opens with him when he's a kid laying on his floor drawing. That was my whole childhood. That's where you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's, one of his teachers saying really rude things to him. Well, that was me in high school,
Yeah.
I remember a guidance counselor, saying, well, what do you want to do with your life? I said, I didn't want to go into art or writing. She's like, look at these English grades. Forget the writing, So, everyone who's creative and has made a career in this has been through this. So a lot of that deeply personal stuff went into this short. And then, of course, you're dealing with this wonderful death character. And one of the touch points for us was also the Twilight Zone, because it's a short piece. What is it? I don't know, about 13 minutes or something?
Like less than 20, certainly.
Yeah, somewhere between 13, 15 minutes, I think. I'm never good with remembering how long these things are. So it was like a little Twilight Zone episode. And that's what I kept thinking of it as. It's just this beautiful, and there's no show in the history of television I love more than Twilight Zone. So to get to write a story like this, and also to be part of a team that's bringing Neil's death character out of the pages of comics for the first time. I don't think she'd ever appeared in any other media.
Nope, you're right.
This. So it was great. It was great. And again, we got to do it with an original story as opposed to an adaptation, which is always fun.
Yeah.
But you also hope the same thing, that you are true to the essence of that character in that world. And I hope so, because I'm really, really proud of that one too. And actually right now, just to mention, since you're talking about the shorts, the Justice League Dark movie, the new one, just came out.
It's called Apocalypse War. Yeah.
And there's an Adam Strange short on there that I wrote as well.
Yeah, I bought it and I didn't know there was a short, so I just saw the movie and then that was the end of it. But I had heard you.
You bought the download? Yeah.
Yeah, I bought the download. Yeah. I don't know if it comes with it. If it doesn't, I'll have to hunt for the short.
I've seen people discussing online. How do I get the short if I bought the download? And apparently, there's some trick somewhere to purchase the movie to somehow get the short. But if you're buying the DVD, the Blu-ray, whatever, then you're right short on there.
See, this is what I'm talking about.
Just let me say, I think eventually what they will do, because they just started this whole new round of shorts, maybe 6 or 8 months ago or something, and so I think they will eventually collect all the shorts together.
Okay.
On a
on like a disc or something.
Yeah, so you'll be able to get Death and Adam Strange, and what else have they done? Like they did Sergeant Rock. They've done a bunch of really cool things.
They did a Spectre one that I still have never seen.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one either. I saw the Sergeant Rock one, which actually used the Creature Commandos in it.
No kidding.
The first thing I ever created in comics.
That's amazing.
Back, my first year in the business, the Creature Commandos.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's great. I wonder if the Kuberts had anything to do with that one. They should.
No.
Well, anyway, but these shorts are incredible, but it's amazing because, of course, like your work for them and in animation ranges from the 22-minute show to the full-length feature to the short. Any preference one way or the other, or do you just kind of go like, it doesn't matter, it's all cool?
No, story is story. That's the fun of it. If it's a good story, ultimately it doesn't matter if it's a comic book, if it's a novel, if it's a short, if it's a movie, if it's live action, if it's animated. I just want to tell a good story. Yeah. And you have to adapt to each form, obviously. You're not going to, you could have taken that idea for that Death short and probably expanded that and written a whole novel.
Yeah.
But it's not a novel, it's a short. And also with the shorts, if they're 15 minutes, and you think about what is a half-hour show without commercials these days, maybe 20 minutes. So it's almost like doing a half-hour show. But the form, you learn the rules of the form, and then you filter your story through that. But ultimately, you still have to have a great story, and that's really where it all begins.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your writing seminars and the classes that people can take from you? Because I feel like every time that we sit down and talk, it is like I'm at one and I'm stealing from you. So, let's talk about like what people can get out of that experience and what you offer. Because I kind of not to put too fine a point on it, but I want to sell some more tickets. Like I want to sell some more. I want to drum up some more missions.
Well, in another universe, I just had one 2 weeks ago. Except unfortunately, in this universe, we had to cancel it. So I'm actually seriously pondering trying to figure out a way to bring this online, whether in a shortened version or because it's a full weekend class. It's called Imagination 101. And then we do a 201, which is more writing intensive, which is actually 4 days. So I'm right now, I'm trying to figure out, how would I do that online? Maybe we get together once a week for 90 minutes and do it over the course of 4 or 5 weeks or something. But yeah, so it's a whole weekend, and it's really just peeling apart both from the practical side of writing and story to the metaphysical side of where the hell does this stuff come from and how do we channel this, and really every aspect of writing for comics. We touch on writing for animation, but it's really about writing story, period. Because as I was just saying, it doesn't matter whether it's in a comic book or not. Once we get into the nuts and bolts of, what makes a good plot, what makes good character, what makes good dialogue, all those things, that applies anywhere. So, and what I enjoy about it is I tend to keep the classes small. It's usually at most 10 people.
Okay.
It's a whole weekend. We're locked away in a room together. I let them out. But for the time we're doing the course, we're locked away in a room together. So it's very intimate, and it's a lot of fun. And I have seen time and again that just the nicest bunch of people show up. And I have had people show up from Mexico, Australia, Puerto Rico.
Wow.
I mean, and it always surprises me, I'm always like, no one's going to come from like 10 minutes away, let alone from another country. And then someone shows up, oh, you came all this way. And then I feel like I really better be good. This guy just came from Australia. I better really give him his money's worth.
Yeah.
But it's really, really fun. And what I realized a few years ago is, I've been doing this a long time. I have a lot of knowledge locked away in my head. But when you're doing it, you're not aware of it as knowledge. It's all intuitive.
Right.
So the fun and the challenge of doing the class is that you have to now express these things that you do intuitively. So as I'm expressing it, I'm learning about my own process. And then people ask questions, which makes me think about the process in a different way. And I have an insight that I never had before. So they're learning, I'm learning, and it's really, really fun. So, once this cloud passes and we feel it's safe to have it happen again, I will resume that. But I think that's going to be a while given the current situation, which is why I'm thinking about putting them online. And also the other thing that I do is I work with people one-on-one. I have a story consultation side of things. And if you go to my website, jamesdematteis.com, there's a page for the workshops, there's a page for the story consultations. So people send me their stuff, whether it's their comic book idea or their screenplay or their novel or their short story, and I read it over and then we get on Skype and we talk and I work with them one-on-one. And it's a very different thing than the class because it's really intimate. It's just me and one other person, and we're peeling their story apart, and we're putting it back together again. And I hope that I do what the best editors have done for me, which is to help them, not to impose my vision on their story, but to help them see their own story with clearer eyes so they can bring out the best in what they have.
Yeah.
Over the years, the best editors I've worked with have been able to do that. The worst editors are the ones that come in and want to impose their will on your story and kind of write their story over yours or change your story so much that it becomes their story.
Right.
Whereas the really great editors are the ones that say, have you looked at that aspect of your story? Because if you bring that out, you have a whole other thing happening here. And then you begin to see things in your own story. It was your idea, but things that you'd never saw that way.
Yeah.
And that's really the fun of working with people, is to just kind of illuminate the work that they have in front of them and help them to really build it out so that it's really, really a beautiful building, a story building that they've constructed by the time they're done.
Right. That's really cool. And it's an incredible, like, I don't know, you'd think as a freelancer, as a writer, working on so many different projects, your time is limited. So to dedicate a portion of that time to helping other people develop their craft is really kind of cool. It's really selfless. Like, I kind of dig it.
Well, first of all, it's not selfless because they are paying.
They are paying, yeah. But
if I was doing it for free, then you can saint me and build the statue we were talking about.
Fair enough.
But they are paying for it. But it's fun for me, and part really, truly, part of the reason why I'm doing it is to give back.
Right.
I've often said, when I started in the business, I had people like Paul Levitz and Jack Harris and Lynn Wein, who was my mentor of mentors when I started in the business. Jim Shooter at Marvel, guys that really taught me a lot when I came in, and said, saw my raw talent and helped me learn the skills I needed to translate that raw talent into story. And so I'm just trying to do the same thing that people have done for me over the years.
Now, you talk about being a freelancer. How, because of your long-standing career, how long, have you actually been self-employed versus like a quote-unquote staff writer? Like, how long have you? I don't think I ever. I don't think I ever really had a real job. I was kind of like getting to that point. I feel like that's the way it was.
I always joke that before I transitioned into full-time writing, I was a musician. I was playing in bands. So I was never, practicality was never my strong suit. That it paid off is a miraculous thing.
Yeah.
So I never really worked. I've done temp jobs, back in the early days. I would, find some job in the Times and go work for 2 weeks and make some money. And I always hated it because, I just couldn't bear being in somebody's office doing something that I didn't want to do, because I wanted to make music and I wanted to write stories, and that's just who I am. Yeah. And I always say it, and only half jokingly, God didn't make me very good at anything else. And I think that's the reason why I succeeded, because I knew the alternative was not very good.
Yeah.
I living in a box, suicide. I don't know what the alternative would have been.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to make light of suicide.
No, of course.
But it really is truly, those are my passions, and I always followed my passions. And this is one of the things we talk about in the workshop, is the importance of passion, and not just passion, but will in succeeding in the creative life. I always say you need to have a really fierce will. You need to be Green Lantern.
Yeah.
You need to have a really fierce will and channel your imagination through that will. And because you are going to encounter, it's just the nature of the beast, you are going to encounter lots of rejection. And the rejection will not end after you're successful.
Right.
Part of the freelance life is there's always rejection.
Yeah.
I always say people, and I see people's eyes bug out in the workshop when I talk about this. And I say, you only see the successes. You don't see the 8 other projects I pitched that got bounced, or that took 10 years or 15 years, or in some cases 20 years before I could sell them. That's just the nature of the beast, and you have to get used to it. I would say you need a fierce will and a hard head.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I found that a healthy amount of delusion, like the belief that you will succeed, but not to the point where it's a detriment to your well-being.
Right. Not in the sense of like egotism.
Right.
Right, not in the sense of like, hello world, here I am, I'm great.
You're welcome, yeah.
No, but you have to really believe, you do. And that's one thing I've always had. I always had that belief.
Yeah.
This is what I want to do, and somehow I'm going to do it. And you have to have that. And I don't think it's delusion. Now, the rest of the world thinks it's delusion.
That's the thing. To put
your parents might think it's delusion. Your friends might think it's delusion. And that's the thing about, working in the arts.
Yeah.
The thing you're going to hear over and over again is like, it's not practical.
Right.
It's not practical. You want to be a writer? You want to be a musician? You want to be an actor? Are you crazy? Do you know how many people don't make it? Do you know the rejection that you go through? Well, if every person took that advice, then there would be no writers or actors or musicians or anything. But that's, and I've always said, if I was practical, I wouldn't be doing this. No. Practicality, at least through the world's view of practicality, is something as a quality I've never had. And maybe in other arenas of my life I could have used it a little bit more, but you have to throw that stuff to the wind, and you have to believe with every fiber of your being, and you have to have that will, so that when that door slams in your face, even for the 8th or 10th time, I always say, go under your desk, bang your head against the wall, cry, whatever you have to do. And sometimes I probably literally done all those things in the scope of my career. And then you take a deep breath and you come back out and you write the next story, or you send that story out for the 15th time. And, I talk about the fact that some of these stories really did. They took years to sell. One of my favorite examples is a story called The Life and Times of Savior 28 that I did for IDW about 10 years ago. It started as a Captain America idea that I had. Well, it's a very long story, but basically I was about to do the idea. Marvel said, no, you can't do that, but I loved the idea, and I nursed it, and I played with it, and I changed it into my own character in my own universe. And then I'd pitch it, and it would get rejected, and I'd put it away for a few years, and then I'd work on it some more, and I'd pitch it, and they just wouldn't get it.
Yeah.
So I was working on Captain America in the early 80s.
That's right.
So now we're in like 2008.
Right? And you're still plug it away. And I've dusted
this thing off every 5 years or whatever it is. And my buddy Mike Cavallero sends me some art one day, and I went, and he was in a real Kirby phase, so he was like being very inspired by Kirby. I went,
okay.
I went, this art would be just so great for this story I have. And I sent him the story, and he went, oh, I want to do this with you. And so that day, I dusted off the outline, and I probably fine-tuned it. I sent it off to Chris Ryle at IDW. Yes. And this has never happened to me before. The day that I sent it off, he called me back and said, we're doing this.
Nice.
So it took 25 years to get an instant acceptance.
Right. And how many of those do you get where you pitch a book and you get the reaction in the same day?
And, and by the same token, sometimes ideas come along and you pitch it and you sell it right away. But I'm just saying, you just never know. And so you need a certain kind of nervous system to do this. And there have been times over the years where I've said, turn to my wife and I say, how have I done this so long? Why have I not had a complete mental breakdown? But it's because I love it. It's because I love it. And even on the worst days, there is so much that comes back to me that I am grateful for and that I love about what I do. That there was a period, I don't know, maybe it's 15 years ago or 20 years ago, where I was really questioning whether I should continue to do this. I just thought maybe it's time to let this go and do something else. And I fantasized about what other career would it be or whatever it was. And I really had to, we get sort of merged. Our identity becomes merged with what we do.
Yes.
I am a writer. I am a musician. And so I had to really surrender my writer self to the universe and let go of it in a way I had never let go of it before. And it was really scary.
Yeah.
But what came back to me was, sorry, you're a writer. Because even if you weren't being paid for this, you'd be laying on the floor somewhere, staring into space, making up stories in your head. Yeah. So you might as well get paid for it. You're a writer. There's no way around it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, my question is about Life and Times of Savior 28. Would it have been as good if you had been greenlit 25 years ago?
I've thought about that question. And in some ways, well, my skill set in 2008 was way beyond what it was in 1983. Right. It just was. Not, I'm very happy that my Captain America run is so well respected.
It is.
But, a couple of decades go by, you hope that you learn and you grow as a writer and you just keep getting better.
Exactly.
So there's that. The flip side is, I think, had they allowed me to do, there was been nothing like that story in mainstream comics back then. I mean, it was really dismantling. It was superhero deconstruction before there was such a thing as superhero deconstruction. It was a very different, and for its, especially if we would have done it then, it would have been a very radical story that I think would have gotten a lot of attention.
Yeah.
At the same time, I'm really glad I got to do it with my own universe and my own characters. So you didn't have to worry about someone else walking in the room and going, "You can't do that. Can't use that guy." Character.
Yeah.
You know? So I think somewhere in some other universe, that story was done in 1983 for Captain America, and I hope it's a much beloved story in that other universe. You know? But in this universe, I'm very happy that we did it at Savory 28, and I did it with Mike, who's one of my all-time favorite collaborators.
Yeah.
Just for a plug, Mike and I just last year for IDW did a project called Impossible Incorporated. The collected edition is out now, and it's another project that I really, really love. It's sort of a tribute to the sort of classic Fantastic Four, almost Doctor Who kind of cosmic adventure.
Okay.
Kind of stories that I love. And we had so much fun with it. And if you're a fan of that kind of story, and you know, to go back to that kind of Silver Agey kind of story, but recast it in a contemporary mode.
Right.
So it gets to be cosmic. It gets to be metaphysical. The main character is the 17-year-old girl genius whose father, who's sort of the Reed Richards character, has disappeared like 10 years before. So she's having these cosmic adventures while searching for her dad. And it's a really fun series. And Mike just topped himself with this one. Just some great, great artwork. End of plug.
We talked a little bit about adaptations. My question is, obviously I know you have a list in your head, but like among the work that you have produced, which are you waiting for the adaptations to come?
That's a good question.
Because I know we've heard a number. I know that like the new Spider-Man series, I've heard nonstop Kraven's Last Hunt as a pitch for 3. And I'm like, you start with the last one? I don't know, but.
Right, yeah. I mean, I was talking to somebody and they had a great idea. Their idea was you get Sam Raimi.
Yeah.
You get Tobey Maguire, and you play it as the older, you know, Kirsten Dunst, the whole thing, and you play it as that Spider-Man, the older Spider-Man, and you do it as a standalone film, just the way they did the Joker.
Yep.
It's Kraven's Last Hunt on its own with an older Spider-Man, because you can't do it now with the
He's
current
too young.
continuity. He's way too young and would have no impact.
Wait, that's right.
He's way too young to get married.
Yeah, because that's intrinsically connected, right? I mean, the whole story is about like, well, you know, we don't need to get into that, but like the fact is, you need it to be, you know, people to point at it as like a self-contained kind of like OGN nowadays,
right?
But it is intrinsically connected to the saga of this character at this one stage in his life. You can't just like read it in a vacuum.
Right. And certainly, you know, you need a more mature Spider-Man. You need a guy who's in his early to mid 20s.
Yeah.
Preferably mid 20s, really. And you know, Tobey Maguire can fake that.
I think so. he's been faking being 10, 20 years younger for
That's right. You know. Anyway, so what would I like to see adapted?
What do we?
More of my creator-owned stuff for sure.
Absolutely.
You know, I think you know, and I have you know, representation in LA who are out there pitching this stuff all the time. But I would love to see Moonshadow as a movie. Moonshadow, and now, you know, finally the technology sort of caught up with the story, so they could actually do it.
Yeah, it would look good.
You know, 20 years ago, you couldn't have done Moonshadow without it looking a little weird, unless, you know, Terry Gilliam probably could have pulled it off because he's got such a great visual imagination.
Yeah.
I used to think Terry Gilliam doing Moonshadow, that would just have been, oh my God, I can't imagine. So Moonshadow, I would love to see. Savior 28.
Right.
I know there are folks at IDW that really would like to see this developed as a film or a TV series, which I think after seeing the brilliant job that they did with Watchmen, I think Savior 28 would be great.
Or even the adaptation of The Boys. I mean, you see how successful The Boys became.
Yes, did a great job with that.
Yeah,
really great job with that.
I kind of prefer it personally.
Interesting. You know, I went into Watchmen. It's funny because it's like, when I heard about Watchmen, I was like, "What are they? It's not even Watchmen."
That's exactly what my response was. Yeah.
And then my wife watched. I said, "I don't want to watch it." My wife watched it without me. She said, "You should watch this. This is really good." So I finally watched it, and I have to say they did a brilliant job with it.
Yeah.
A really brilliant job with it. It was amazing. So what else? God, there's so much. Really, you know, my creator owns Girl in the Bay, the book I did last year for for Karen Berger would make a great film or a TV series.
Yep.
And then the kid-friendly stuff that I've done, Stardust Kid that I did with Mike Plug and Abadazat that we did for Disney would be a great, great film. Lots of those things. And, in terms of the Marvel DC stuff, why no one has done JLI is beyond me.
Well, come on.
It's just beyond me. By now, they at least as an animated feature.
That's right.
It would be great. And so you don't want to call them Justice League. We called them the Super Buddies when we came back to them. So call them the Super Buddies. It's the same thing. And to be honest, a lot of those movies, a lot of those Marvel movies really have the flavor of our Justice League anyway. So you've got the action adventure, you've got the humor, you've got these great characters.
Right.
I when we were working on Batman Brave and the Bold back in the day, there was talk at the end of Brave and the Bold that they were going to transition to a JLI series.
Oh.
And it came pretty close, I guess, but it's sort of like that. Came close, but didn't happen.
Not here, so yeah.
Right. Except, again, in this parallel universe, somewhere there's a JLI animated series that I got to write for. Ugh. But I would love to see JLI. It would be great. And even, talking about animation, I think I've said before that Kraven, if they can't do a live action, do what DC does with these movies. Do a great, animated Kraven's Last Hunt.
Yeah.
And so wait, I'm asking DC for a DC Universe, right? Subscription.
Yep. Right.
And Marvel, I will write the Kraven's Last Hunt animated film.
Oh,
I'm ready.
Come on. That's something that Marvel is sorely behind on DC with, where DC is like, let's make adaptation after adaptation plus original feature after original feature, all within their own animated universe. Yeah. You talk about a company that's the leading animation studio in America, and you leave out Disney because they're just not doing it. And you're like, what kind of world are we living in here? Like, how come there aren't just cranking out? Like,
take these classic Marvel stories and do animated adaptations. They certainly do a lot of animation. In fact, I have an episode of Spider-Man coming up next month.
Yes, you do. Hey,
plug that. This is my third episode for this iteration of Spider-Man. But I would love to see them do that, or Kraven's Last Hunt as an anime. Because I always say the other problem is when you have your lead character buried alive for a third of the story.
Right.
And you're paying your lead actor $25 million or whatever it is. He's going to be really pissed. Wait, I'm what?
Yeah. They don't like to wear the mask as it is. And
right. I always say you watch those first 3 Raimi movies, and in each movie there's less mask.
As his agent starts getting more and more control.
Right.
Yeah.
Bang! Oh, half my mask came off. Oh,
oh no! Well, I'm no helping it now. Take it off.
Right. I have to say I love those movies. So
there's strength, I think, to almost all of them. Like, I love, in terms of like every iteration, I really like what Garfield does. I don't know if I like the stories necessarily, but I like what
but he was a good Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Emma Stone was great.
I loved her.
They all have something to recommend them.
That's right.
My favorites remain the first 2 Raimi movies, though. I have to say, are my absolute favorites, especially the second one.
2 is amazing.
Yeah. I hadn't seen it in years, and I know what happened. Our Wi-Fi went out, I think is what it was. So I said, what should I want? I dug out the DVD and popped it in, and it really holds up. It's a really good movie. Really good movie.
Yeah. I fell in love with Otto. I mean, Alfred Molina is just incredible.
Yeah.
I'm so happy for him too, because his stock kind of went up recently. Like, I see him all over the place.
He's a wonderful actor.
He's an incredible actor, yeah. But man. So in terms of the future, I love seeing your name crop up constantly. Like, every time I see one of these movies or I see a new book that's coming out from you, original creator-owned work, it's just exciting and incredible. And it's going to be a good ride, because your approach is never like, how can we get the biggest explosion for our dollar? It's always like, well, the explosion is going to happen in the character's soul. Like, we're going to really blow open who they are.
That's a great way to put it. I'm going to steal that and use it in my workshop.
Feel free. No, yeah. Because your Spider-Man run...
Explosions of the Soul. I probably wrote a story with that title,
Oh, come on, yeah. Because that's the thing, like, explaining books to people that don't normally read them. You have the story, and then you have the individual issues that have their own titles for them. And I remember they couldn't wrap their heads. They're like, I thought this whole thing was called Maximum Carnage. I'm like, no. This chapter is called like the Web of Death, or so, it's like each one reflects what this individual story is about. Right. But yeah, no, I'm sure Explosion of the Soul is a story.
I think it might have been one of my stories. That title sounds so familiar to me. I'm going to have to look through my...
that may have been I Got Incepted.
That's funny. That's really funny.
But yeah, man. But I love it because it taught me as a kid it does those things where sometimes you have to trick your audience. You're selling them. You got to trick your kid into eating their vegetables.
Right.
And with your particular work, it's like, you get the fun superhero stuff. You're not going to be shortchanged. You're going to get maybe Spider-Man's in the ground, but it's still Spider-Man in the ground. You're going to get all the Spider-Man stuff. Plus, you got at least one person running around as Spider-Man. You get all that art, but you also have the depth and the gravity of its impact, and you never kind of shy away from it. In fact, you shine the light on it. I just recently reread Soul of the Hunter, and whew. Just for as dark or as deep as Kraven goes, Soul of the Hunter, oft not mentioned, and it should be, because it's just...
Yeah, I think it was last year they put out a big Kraven collection that for the first time had that with Kraven's Last Hunt, and I was so happy, because that really is the bookend to that.
It is, yeah. And as I recall, and I've read this before, and I'd like to get your opinion on it, it was kind of a response to the kind of like misinterpretation of the glorification of suicide.
Yes. Well, the misinterpretation was that they thought it was glorification.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Tom DeFalco who was editor-in-chief at the time, had gotten some letter from some suicide prevention group where they thought we were glorifying suicide. And I was horrified. That's not what the story is about.
Not the takeaway.
Kraven's last words are, "They said my mother was insane." Yeah. Spoilers. and I honestly, I felt terrible. And I said, well, I need to do a story that addresses this. But, it's kind of what you're saying, that's the motivation. But then I write from the inside out. Even if I have like an idea that's it's a cool concept. The cool concept doesn't matter unless you have the characters to ground them in.
That's right.
So what does this mean for Peter, who's just been through this, who was buried alive, who lost lost a whole chunk of his life there.
Yeah.
Who also is the most responsible human and guilt-riddled human on the planet.
Yep.
And who's thinking, what could I have done to stop this man from killing himself? I mean, there's so many levels and layers there to Peter's psychology.
Yeah.
So it was a great door into that story. And I'm glad to hear you say that, because I think when it came out, people were like, ooh, a sequel to Kraven's Last Hunt. And so they were expecting the same thing.
Right.
And you don't want to write a sequel that's the same thing. You want to write a sequel that's something different. We did the same thing with Moonshadow. 10 years after we did Moonshadow, we did Farewell Moonshadow.
Right.
And the only reason we did it was we said we want to tell it to be a very different story, even in the way that we tell it, which is why we did like a page of prose, a page of illustration, a page of prose, a page of illustration.
Yeah.
So you want you don't want to repeat it, or else why do it? Just leave the original story alone.
Exactly.
So I'm glad that it holds up and that you found it valuable.
Oh, thank you. There are collections of yours that are lacking. Let's signal boost them. Where is your Buscema Spectacular run in collection?
This is the great mystery of life for me. Not the great mystery of life, but certainly the great mystery of comic book life. The great mystery of comic book life,
Yeah.
Because I don't understand why that's never been. It's been collected in other countries. I was in.
It's
Italy.
in Italian. I was
in Italy last year, and they go, "Here, look at this! Look what we just did." They just did one in South America. I think it was in Brazil. And random stories have been in collections. Mm-hmm. But the whole run, which is one of my favorite things I've ever done in the world of superheroes, with one of the greatest collaborators I've ever had, one of the most underrated, brilliant artists in the world, Sal Buscema.
Yeah.
It's never been collected, and I know there are a lot of people out there that really, really, really care about that run, and it means something to them. And I have no clue why it's never been collected. And I'm like everybody else. They release the information every month about what's coming out. I don't know. Half the time when they collect my stuff, I don't know beforehand.
Sure.
I'm just reading it like everybody. Oh, look what's coming out. I didn't know that. And sometimes I see some collection of something that I'm like, why did they collect that?
Yes. What? You know? Come on. Yeah.
I wanted people to forget that story, you know. And then I'm waiting every month. It's like, well, where's Spectacular Spider-Man? Where's the child, or at least the Child Within? That 7-issue arc.
Yeah.
But the whole 2 years with the Harry Osborn arc, you know.
Yeah.
I would love to just see that whole thing collected. So, do I have to talk to the camera again? So Marvel, really, it's way past time for that collection. So I'll write you a new introduction, the whole thing.
Oh,
let's get it done.
You know, those omnibuses are pretty popular nowadays. You can get a whole big old, you get $100 out of that thing. Come on.
Yeah, we worked on that book, I guess, for if you include Maximum Carnage, it was over 2 years.
Yeah. And those
the Harry Osborn thing alone was, I think, 2 years.
That's what I'm saying. That's 2 years worth of stories. They did the whole Clone Saga, so you know.
I know. I've got these giant. What's the plural? Is it omnibuses or omnibi?
I don't know. I would say buses.
Omnibuses, yeah. I like, but even I like omnibi. It's just
fun. Well, who doesn't like to say octopi? Who doesn't love to pluralize that? Yeah.
But I think it is omnibuses. But I've got all these Clone Saga omnibuses on my shelf behind me, and they did the JLI one, which is massive, just massive. So I'd love to see, collect just collect the damn thing for God's sake.
Yeah, you're a book publisher. Make these things.
That's right.
But man, I will ask one more question, and then I will let you get back to work because I know you are, because you're busy all the time. What is there? If there's a character out there that they haven't given you a crack at, who is it and why? You're like, come on, I would love to do this character. Even if you don't even have a story, just I've never written for. I want to do that, something like that.
Good question. I've been able to write most of these characters. There are some characters I'd like to revisit, like Doctor Strange, Silver Surfer. Especially at DC, I've had, between the animation and the comics, I've had a shot at almost every character in some form.
Yeah, you had Justice League Dark. You got to crack on everybody.
All right, and then I love the DC Supernatural characters in Justice League. I was writing Phantom Stranger and Justice League Dark at the same time, so I was just. And I would go back to that corner of the DC universe anytime. But the answer that I always come back with, and if you ask Keith or Kevin, they'll probably give you the same answer. Certainly Keith will. I want to work with those two guys, and I want to do the Fantastic Four.
Oh.
I'm not trying to take work away from anyone else. We'll do a miniseries, just, give us 6 issues, set it in the 60s, and let us have fun with it. And I think that would be, that's I think maybe one of the few unrealized comic book dreams in terms of pre-existing characters.
Yeah.
And to do it with those guys, it would just be great. It would just be great.
I think so too. Jan, thank you so much. Where can everybody find you and get more of your work?
Well, you can find me on Twitter, which it's all just @JMDeMatteis. Same thing on Facebook. And my website, jmdmatteis.com, where you can also get information about the workshops and the story consultation. So that pretty much covers it.
I think so.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for being here. And
pleasure to talk to you as always.
My pleasure. The pleasure's all mine. And we'll see you guys next week with an all new episode. See you guys then. So long.
Stay safe and healthy.
Yeah.